What's up, everybody? This is Jake, the Crypto King, and you're listening to the What is Crypto podcast.
My name is the Crypto Titan, and you're listening to the What is Crypto podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back to the What is Crypto podcast, where we teach you a little bit about the basics of cryptocurrency. Today, I have a very special guest and a good friend of mine,
Jake Greenbaum,
aka the Crypto King, and Ty Blackard, aka
Crypto Titan,
on the podcast. Jake is a very intelligent individual. He has a lot of experience in the crypto space, and beyond that, he's a serial entrepreneur. He's the founder of Node, Crypto Luxury, and Anon. Ty is one of the main proponents of the company FOMO Hunt. FOMO Hunt really focuses heavily on events for cryptocurrency in the space and being a portal for all the information you need to learn about cryptocurrency and blockchain. In this conversation, we're diving deep into the concept of advocation. We talk a little bit about the difference of an influencer versus an advocate, why advocating for Bitcoin is important, and how you recommend people learn about this technology in the very beginning. I want to be clear, this is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. If you want to make your investments, you do so on your own, but please do not consider anything that we say financial advice. It is strictly for educational purposes only. And finally, guys, head over to our Facebook channel or to Twitter to dive into the conversation and to become a participant. All right, let's take a listen into the conversation about advocation. So, why do you do what you do?
Great question. It's because I have the most fun doing it. So I learned, a couple of years ago that I'm not going to do anything that I don't truly love doing or have a passion for. In crypto and in the blockchain industry, it really gives me the opportunity to be me and to do all the things that I love to do. And some of those things are just, meeting new people. Sometimes it's creating video content for my YouTube channel. Sometimes it's, obviously helping with business development at FOMO Hunt and then, of course, traveling the world. I can do all these things. And, the best part about it is I can, make this impact in an industry that is just beginning. I think it's just because I can have fun and do the things that I would like to do.
I actually love crypto. I started off undergrad wanting to be a finance major, and I thought there was too much wrong with the finance system. I constantly found myself arguing with the professor regarding whether or not economics was supply and demand, everything was perfect. I always felt like there was an invisible hand able to control things. And crypto understands that you shouldn't manipulate markets, but markets are controllable. People who are whales do move markets, whether it's in real markets or whether it's in cryptocurrency. So I love crypto basically because it taught me that the real world wasn't as it seems, and it helped educate me on the future of what I expected the world to be.
And what's your definition of an influencer versus your definition of an advocate? This is kind of like a conversation that I've been having with a couple people recently. And there's like a lot of hate on influencers, but I don't think there's like a clear line or a clear definition between what's an influencer versus what's an advocate. What's your opinion on that?
I really think it's almost tomato tomato because I know a lot of individuals that refer to themselves as influencers that have never really made any money influencing for a project. But I know a lot of individuals that call themselves advocates or ambassadors for a project where the project's paying them thousands of dollars a month to be an ambassador. So I feel like it's really tomato tomato, whatever the term you want to use to describe someone that's a important numerical person on either Twitter or YouTube. They're either an influencer or an advocate, depending on the term you're using to describe them. One having a very negative connotation, one having a fairly positive connotation. But in the reality of things, I think there is almost no difference unless you're strictly describing a Bitcoin ambassador, in which case they're not really being paid by anyone. They're just trying to spread the gospel regarding cryptocurrency and Bitcoin.
Now, I don't have a problem with getting paid or not paid to say messages. That's not really a big deal to me. I think anybody should be able to make the money they can. But an influencer is basically somebody who has opinions that are highly valued by the community because of maybe how often they've traveled to different parts of the world and seen different parts of the industry, or if they have, been able to work with a lot of blockchain or crypto companies that helps them give more perspective. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these Twitter profiles out there haven't done a whole lot of traveling, and they may want to have that perspective. And the only way to do that is to get it from an influencer of sorts. I think an influencer focuses solely on maybe the benefits of a product or a company and doesn't discuss the issues. And I think that's where an advocate, can differentiate. An advocate is trying to, advocate for the industry, but at the same time, they are not blind to the issues that exist.
And would you call yourself an influencer?
Um, I don't think I would, to be honest. I'm just a guy out here just trying to do what I love to do. I wouldn't really call myself an influencer. I would just say that I'm just trying to create YouTube content when possible. I'm just trying to meet people when possible. Trying to, I guess, spread the adoption, get blockchain and crypto in the mainstream. So I wouldn't consider myself an influencer. People can call me, what they'd like to. But I myself, I wouldn't say I'm an influencer.
And why is that important, right? Why is the advocation or the influencing for Bitcoin specifically important for people to be doing?
In this day and age, especially, I think that the corruption that exists in governments these days, in how they handle money and how they create money, how they even run the government in itself, I think it's more open now that we're in the digital age, and we can kind of see more and more, how authorities like to, mismanage power. And at the end of the day, when the authority controls your money, they control you. So if you value freedom, or if you value freedom of your wealth, then you would advocate for Bitcoin, in my opinion. Some people like to say, gold is the way to do it, or silver. But the problem is, if you know your history, you know that pretty much, gold throughout history has been confiscated. You can go as far back as 1933 in the U.S. to know that there was an executive order placed and gold was taken from people. And if you really want something that's unseizable, how is somebody going to know that you got 10 Bitcoin in your ledger, or 10 Bitcoin? You wouldn't want to do this, but 10 Bitcoin on your on your software wallet on your phone. Nobody's going to know about that. But if you try to lug around gold through the airport, good luck. It ain't happening. So I definitely think that advocating for Bitcoin is extremely important, especially for anybody who values, freedom of wealth, so to speak.
Well, as I mentioned before, the most important thing in my eyes is education, not in the actual space of an educational environment, like a schooling environment, but in the space of understanding what money is, what the dollar bills in your pocket represent, how they're no longer backed by gold, how they're no longer exchangeable for anything. By actually understanding what Bitcoin is and being an ambassador for Bitcoin, just telling people that it's a deflationary asset, telling people there's only 21 million that can forever be mined, showing them the 10-year graph, showing everything about Bitcoin, even the white paper. All these are extremely important things to spread the message about Bitcoin, and there's no monetary gain for doing so. So Bitcoin ambassadors are clearly different than ambassadors for other cryptocurrencies that are being paid. So if it's an ambassador that's being paid, I'd say they're much closer to an influencer. But at the same time, I really think it's tomato, unless you're specifically talking about Bitcoin ambassadors.
I think if you solely focus on trying to be an influencer, then yeah, I can see it's definitely a difference, from an advocate versus an influencer. I think I would actually say you're more of an advocate, my friend. I would say you're more of an advocate for blockchain and crypto. Your thoughts sometimes lean towards like VR, AR, and of course, blockchain. And I think you're just passionate about the tech and passionate about the industry. But some people will obviously label you as an influencer, but I don't really see it that way. I think an influencer is somebody who solely focuses on crafting narratives for companies that they're working with, and that's it. You need to also be yourself. And if you're not yourself, I think you're kind of wasting away your personal brand. And so I think you do that really well. I think your Twitter account is run really well. And I think that I love your opinions. I love your thoughts on the industry. And I think that if more people could take tips from you on how to run it in that way.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And is it good, is it bad, or is it neutral to be paid to quote unquote influence? What's your opinion on that topic? You know, there's a lot of people online that hate on it. There's a lot of people online that do it. Shit, our podcast has sponsors, you know, is that negative? No, I don't think so. Some people would argue that it is. What's your opinion on influencing for other projects and getting paid to do so?
I think the key is transparency. As long as you're transparent about whether you're influencing, whether you're paid to advertise, whether you're just excited about a project's upcoming mainnet, as long as you're transparent about what's going on, I think that's the key. Because in any industry you go into, they have paid shows, they have advertisements, they have all sorts of ways to express themselves. I mean, look at Instagram, look at all these other different platforms that people are literally selling posts. So if that's allowed to take place, which it is, and the only rules are being transparent, that should apply to crypto as well. Even though the regulatory bodies haven't said anything yet, I think the fact that we have to be transparent, whether you're an influencer, an ambassador, if you're receiving money to spread news about something, I think the key is to be transparent. And as long as you're being transparent, I don't see an issue with it.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I think the main argument that people have is that you're not advertising water where somebody can possibly drink some water, probably 99.99% chance like it's not going to hurt them. But in the crypto space, there's the potential of advertising for a coin or an exchange that decides to get up an exit scam a few months later, and maybe your followers had been on that exchange or had bought that token. And so there's a little bit higher risk there. But then at the same time, a lot of the whole ethos around Bitcoin and around cryptocurrency is the fact that you need to have personal responsibility over your finances. What's kind of your opinion on like that kind of the topic?
You obviously 100% have to have personal responsibility over your own finances, but at the same time, everyone's looking for a get rich quick scheme, and that's the problem. If you're searching for a get rich quick scheme, you're likely going to get scammed in the crypto space. If you're looking for a long term build where you can actually build your own platform or invest in a platform that's being built that you truly believe in because you know the founders, you know the code, you understand what's going on, that's completely different. So I think being responsible for your own finances and doing your own due diligence will rid the crypto space of a lot of the issues it's currently having, where people just jump on board because someone sent a tweet out.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I think there's the problem with like this whole conversation is the idea of advocating versus influencing. You know, it's something we talked about in the very beginning of it. It's something that I struggle with on a daily basis, not particularly like whether I'm influencing or whether I'm advocating, but the fact that the more that you grow your follower base, the more that people tune into to what you're posting and subscribe to what you're talking about, that they always have a specific opinion about these things. I want to know like what are some of the biggest challenges for advocating for Bitcoin or for cryptocurrency that you've personally found in your experience when you're talking to someone and trying to get them either interested in Bitcoin or maybe trying to explain to them what it is? What's some of those challenges you faced?
Some of the biggest challenges would probably be ignoring the issues that Bitcoin has. I don't like to pretend that Bitcoin doesn't have issues that could flare up in the future, because then I'm being dishonest with myself, and then we can't really improve Bitcoin in the future or figure out ways to just make Bitcoin work better. Obviously, at the moment, there is the issue about the volatility. I think that will be solved with more liquidity as time goes on. I mean, look at gold. I mean, gold's not changing in price too often, or very volatile moves. At least you can look at Bitcoin. Obviously, is a little bit slow. For a transaction, we're not going to lie about that. And I think that the issue is a lot of these Bitcoin maximalists. They like to kind of ignore the fact that Bitcoin does have a lot of issues. At the same time, I still think it's very important, and I still think it's very worthwhile to have as an asset, especially to hedge against the traditional, the legacy markets. So That's probably the biggest challenge of advocating for Bitcoin is just ignoring the blaring issues that Bitcoin has. And I think that where an influencer would kind of take this approach is an influencer would pretty much say, well, Bitcoin is great. Bitcoin is the end all. It has no problems. It is perfect and blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of how I see Bitcoin maximalists. And then, of course, I see an advocate saying, look, I love Bitcoin, but at the same time, guys, we need to figure out how to solve these issues about Bitcoin so that we can make it the best asset to hold and the best currency to use.
Well, some of the biggest challenges right off the bat are the majority of the public aren't finance majors. They never dealt with the stock market. They don't understand how the US dollars in their pocket are even printed. Most still think that we're on the gold standard, which means you can literally take your dollar to a bank or one of the national banks and get gold for it. And that stopped almost 100 years ago. So the fact that the general population is completely unaware of how money's created across the world, it's very hard for them to understand how Bitcoin's created. Most people don't even understand the difference between inflationary assets and deflationary assets. So until you get the general population understanding how dollars are printed, how the Federal Reserve is actually a private bank, once you get the public to understand all these little nuances, it becomes very clear that Bitcoin is an alternative and a great alternative to the current corrupt system we face. But the problem is, how do you educate the entire populace when they're not interested? Or at a bare minimum, it's not impacting their life on a daily basis to the point where they should be interested.
Yep, I would agree.
And why should people be interested? This is the topic that you and I talk about with a lot of people as we travel. And I've heard you give some really, really good explanations of this kind of stuff. Why do you recommend people learn about this technology or get interested in this technology?
People don't become interested in topics until it becomes an emergency. Until you actually have a gun to your head, literally, or your back is against the wall, very rarely you don't become interested in changing who you are. And the problem is, where Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are mass adopted, that's actually occurring. If you look at Venezuela and you look at Zimbabwe and you look at countries that were literally overthrown in the last 2 years, almost entirely, their entire population has resorted to cryptocurrency because those people learned very quickly what an inflationary asset is. Their $1 million in their bank account became worth literally 15 over an 8-year period. That's unfathomable. Being able to buy 10 Ferraris and not being able to buy a loaf of bread 10 years later with the same amount of money is absolutely unimaginable for the US population. So until first world countries, until the places that most of the world are familiar with, face these absolute extreme emergencies, financially speaking, they're never going to adopt crypto and Bitcoin because there's no need. Until there's an actual need or the simplicity makes it so simple that there's no other alternative, that's when it'll be adopted. But unfortunately, it's need driven. Once there's a need, crypto will fill that need. But as it stands, the need's in very limited locations, and it's most locations that the rest of the world isn't as concerned with.
So, what is the future of a crypto influencer, in your opinion?
I think a lot of these more maximalist types of people will eventually I think they'll maybe get humbled in a sense. Maybe not. Maybe the Bitcoin maximalists will always be like this. But I think that, maximalists like the XRP maximalists, like the influencers that are directly, regarding those types of projects, I think they'll get humbled in the future. I'm hoping that, everybody will start to kind of wake up to the idea that, we're all in this together. We're all trying to figure out how to create the best form of money, and I think that's why we're all here. We're all here from the beginning. Well, obviously to make money, but I think that the advocates, in this industry are just trying to make a better world. And by doing that, that requires us all to get together and stop just trying to influence people, trying to sell people on a product or trying to sell people on an idea, and start asking questions, start poking holes in theories. And I like I said earlier, I think you do that really well. I think you ask the right questions. You're not necessarily afraid of, the kind of backlash that you might receive for asking those questions. And it's important because, a lot of these people don't really know, what the industry looks like on the inside. They're only looking from the outside of a bubble. And it's what they can kind of see on the surface of all these Twitter accounts, but they're not like traveling to these different places or talking to these, market makers, liquidity makers, these exchanges, and then seeing like how it all actually works. And I guess once you get into it, once you actually see the inside, you're like, I didn't want to see this. This is kind of ugly. And it kind of like changes your perspective on the whole industry. But at the same time, you still know at the end of the day that there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of potential in this industry. And I think that you gotta have to balance the two. But if you just pretend that everything is sunshine and roses, well, then you're going to be dishonest with yourself and dishonest with your following.
I personally think this is the next way of advertising. As companies look at print advertising and advertising via television and radio, the costs are astronomical. The cost of reaching out to influencers and having them advertise is not a cheap cost by any means, but it reaches the same masses, and it reaches masses that are interested in whatever product that you're actually trying to sell versus trying to put it on a channel and reaching a whole group of people completely uninterested. So I think influencers, as long as they're transparent, are going to be the complete next wave of communication because more and more people are using social media and less people are watching TV. So that means the advertising revenue and advertising streams coming from socials are going to do nothing but increase. And the people who are receiving those advertising revenues for the most part are influencers. So as long as they continue to build brand value for the products they're influencing, I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon.
I agree, man. I want to talk finally before we wrap up this interview. I want to ask you a little bit more about your ventures. Ty, what started your interest and your involvement with your current venture, FOMO Hunt?
So it's actually like a kind of a funny story. So I was headed to Southeast Asia back in March, and I didn't have any plans to meet Digital Lawrence, but I just so happened to have a cancel flight. And I knew about FOMO Hunt before I was leaving. I'd seen it around. I'd seen the noise that Lawrence was making with FOMO Hunt, and I wasn't exactly sure what it was. Anyways, I had a canceled flight, and I had to stay a day in Hollywood. And it turns out Lawrence found out that I was I was having a stay in Hollywood. I posted a Twitter post, I guess, and he saw it, and he reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, man, let's go hang out." I was like, "All right, I'm super tired." And I kind of want to sleep because I think I only got like maybe 2 or 3 hours of sleep. And then I'd have an early flight the next morning. But I was like, whatever, screw it. I'll just go hang out and, see what's up. And I hung out with Lawrence. And first thing he does is, he's like, "Hey, man, I got this really cool idea. It's called FOMO Hunt." And he started talking about it and, talking about the events platform and everything that was going on with FOMO Hunt. And right after that, I was hooked. I wanted to help. And he said he was interested in seeing if I could help out in, where I was at in Southeast Asia, like in the Philippines, Thailand, wherever I was traveling. That's pretty much where I started. And then as I went along, I started doing events in Manila and the Philippines. And I really loved doing it so much because I could meet all these new people, through the blockchain industry. And, just seeing everybody so passionate about it and so excited about FOMO Hunt, existing so that everybody could kind of get together in one place. After that was pretty much like my defining moment. I knew I wanted to do a lot more for the company. And then, and then I just started getting a bigger role as time went on. And then, Lawrence started trusting me with more work. And then I started traveling with Lawrence back in August, I think back to Singapore. After Singapore, of course, Seoul, Bali, maybe. And then the list goes on. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of beginnings of that.
Jake, we talked about why you do what you do, but what spurred it? What was the beginning inspiration that said, I want to create pocket nodes, or I want to create crypto luxury, or I want to create FOMO Hunt? Break it down for us one by one, and also give us a little update about where each of these projects are and what progress looks like for the foreseeable future.
I'll start with Pocket Nodes because that one's the most up-to-date one, it's already live. And my first project in crypto years back was a project called Anin. I wanted to create a cryptocurrency that had masternode staking that was completely anonymous. Well, we created the cryptocurrency, but the biggest hiccup was the entire community couldn't figure out how to set up a masternode, given how high-tech the coding behind it is and the difficulties associated with coding the actual masternode. So I had the idea, well, if Annan needed a masternode that was one click, what about the other masternode communities? Well, I looked into it, and all the masternode communities were having the same problem. That none of them were one click, they all required significant coding, and most of the individuals in crypto were traders, investors, and speculators and had no idea how to code. So I built PocketNode, the one-click masternode application. To save on fees on PocketNode, we released the node token because originally we were completely bootstrapped. Being completely bootstrapped, you can only get so far with the build-out. We built the platform successfully. I didn't like ICOs that never released their platform, so instead we built the entire platform, and now post-platform, we're starting to raise money for the platform. That's where PocketNode's at, and trading on the node token will begin in the next few weeks. By the time this interview goes live, I'm sure it'll have already begun. As far as crypto luxury goes, I was noticing that most of my buddies in the crypto space have been collecting Bitcoin for a few years. Whether they have one or they have 1,000, they're hoarding Bitcoin. But they don't really have anything to spend it on. Most people view Bitcoin, as you could over the last 10 years, as an appreciating asset. There are very few assets that when you purchase, you actually expect them to appreciate in both the short and long term. Bitcoin happens to be one of them. So I tried to think of what other assets were in the world that appreciate. And I realized a lot of the luxury watches, whether it's Rolex, Audemars, Patek Philippe, these watches appreciate over the long term if you do your due diligence and find the specific models. So I created crypto luxury as a way to pivot Bitcoin into luxury watches that were likely to appreciate. And it facilitates the use of crypto, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dash, Ethereum, all these cryptocurrencies in the purchasing of these luxury watches. So instead of having to send it to your bank account or have to do all these other things, it's a direct intermediary. So I thought this was the solution.
I love it, bro. You know, I've been a big supporter in all the things that you've been building and working on for a long time. Been there for a good portion of the Pocket Notes thing and watching you go through the ups and downs of it as we travel. And I'm super, super stoked to not only watch you do the crypto luxury thing, but also to probably participate in terms of picking up some watches, hopefully in the future. I think it's a really cool idea, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
And I appreciate you having me on, sir.
Thanks for having me on. I look forward to speaking to you soon.
All right, guys, I want to thank Jake, aka the Crypto King, for coming on the show today. Really means a lot. He's a good friend of mine. And give a big thank you to Ty for coming on the show. Really means a lot to me. The FOMO Hunt guys are doing some really cool stuff. I think there's a thin line between an influencer and an advocate, and I think most people get the two confused. I think it's very important that we have crypto advocates. Guys, for the do your own research portion of this, I want you to go sign up at FOMO Hunt, and I want you to look for local events in your area. If there's an event this week or next week, I want you to attend it. I don't really care if you stand in the back of the room and stay there for 5 minutes. I want you to be there, and I want you to get involved with the crypto space. As a part of your DYOR, your do your own research, I want you to dive into Facebook or to Twitter, and I want you to join in on the conversation. Whether that means joining our Facebook group and asking a specific question, or whether that means going on Twitter and tagging us on Twitter and saying, hey, I want to know about this, or what do you know about that? Ask a question that will help you learn a little bit more about something you don't already know. Anyways, guys, as always, please leave us a rating, please leave us a review, and please subscribe to us on iTunes. It would mean a ton, and we'll catch you in the next episode.